Hey everybody, I'm Mike King and welcome to choir practice. It's the April version and it's on April Fool's Day, but I don't want you to be judgmental about me or anybody that I have on tonight. I'm really excited about the folks that I've got joining tonight, and I think you're going to really enjoy this. And I've already seen a bunch of folks that I just love seeing. And I want to shout out. My in-house counsel is here, so if any legal issues come up, Michelle Morris is here, and we'll bring her on and maybe get some answers from her. But we're going to just have a blast. I want to bring in my guests right now. First, I want to introduce Joe Giacalone from New York Police Department, now working at John Jay College, and also has his own YouTube channel. I hope you'll all go over and subscribe to that. It's called True Crime with the Sarge. Did I get that right, Joe?
You did, Mike.
And Joe's been fighting a little bit of COVID, so we're going to treat him well tonight and have some fun. And welcome to the folks that are piling in. I want to now bring in Dennis Kato, who is a retired chief from the Los Angeles Police Department, longtime friend. In fact, Joe, Dennis, and I met many years ago working on a number of different technology challenges, from the Real-Time Crime Center on through to a bunch of from some other projects. And Dennis is now actually working with a team of old retired professionals that are trying to straighten out large police departments across the country. So they're going in, and maybe you could explain that best, Dennis, but sometimes under a consent decree, other times that they're wise enough to just ask for a little help.
Yeah, Mike, thanks, number one, for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here. It's not so much we go in to straighten or fix anything in the department. What we're primarily doing in this team is really helping departments take a look at data. A lot of departments are now taking on a lot of technology, and a lot of data gets fed into these departments. And how best to use it, how do you use it to deploy your officers, how do you get the officers on the street to actually buy into the concept of using data? That's really what me and my team go into these departments to do. I think that's where we met Mike when we were when I was in Baltimore, and we were trying to work. You were at Esri, I think, at the time, and we were really trying to use that technology to really help Baltimore PD really try to use their resources as best they can using that data.
Yeah, in fact, that was pretty remarkable to watch you and the team, Chief Malinowski and others, as you were gluing together the parts, trying to work with an existing team of leadership. I remember in Baltimore, they actually had to go through a number of chiefs that were interim because of some change in personnel and other kinds of things. So some really interesting changes. You know, along the way, Chief, I also had the chance during that career to work in the Real-Time Crime Center in New York and working under Chief Beltran, Joe, and others in working there. I feel so lucky because I got to spend a career after law enforcement working with like the smartest cops I've ever worked with. And that's kind of the cool thing about coming together tonight. Joe, tell us what you're doing at John Jay now after your retirement.
Yeah, I've been at John Jay now for 19 years. So I always tell my kids, I said, listen, if you can't make through 4, this is in another year I'll have 5 different BA degrees. So just to try to keep them motivated. But yeah, I've been doing that for 20 years. I've written 2 books, the Cold Case Handbook and the Criminal Investigative Function, which is now in its 4th edition. So I've been, busy. I took that pandemic time off to write the new book, that Cold Case Handbook, which was part of one of the jobs I had in the New York City Police Department as the former commanding officer of the Bronx Cold Case Squad. So, I do that, and I like I said, I have the show, but I try to help out people too who are dealing with cold cases, the victims and their families. It's not that easy sometimes. I know people expect you to help, work miracles, so to speak, but it's difficult from an outsider because like the old saying, when you're in, you're a guest. When you're out, you're a pest. And exactly. And it's just that's just the way it goes. But you try to steer people in the right direction and try to help them out. But it's still a tough job to do.
Well, Dennis, one of the things that I kind of have struggled with through my career post law enforcement And, I was fortunate to have a pretty big team when I retired as chief in the AG, but nothing like the numbers that you two had in your departments. I mean, we were talking the 400 and 500s versus the 30s and 40,000s.
Yeah.
But there was always, as I moved into the technology world, there was always this concern that law enforcement's the boots on the street had with any investments the cities were making in technology because of the fear that it was going to replace them. How did you handle that internally as you worked with your teams and tried to bring technology in?
Yeah, I'll try to tackle that first. I know with LAPD, a big hesitation from the street cops, right? The cops that are actually pushing those black and whites, is they can never trust the data. They always felt, and I was one of them. When it was first, Dr. Uchida is one of my colleagues. He first approached me. I was a captain at 77th, which is in South Central Los Angeles. And he said, "Hey, Dennis, I'm going to bring this program. It's going to be able to map out your crime. It's going to show you your data." And I said, he goes, "I'll show you your hot spots and your major intersections that are crime prolific." And I said, "You know what? I don't need it. I've worked here as a street cop for 10 years. I was here as a lieutenant. I've been as a captain now for 4 years. I know my division. I know where the crime is." And he says, "All right, let's do a little test." So he kind of quizzed me. "Well, give me your top 5 intersections." And I nailed it. I knew exactly where my crime was. But that's the hard part, right? If anybody has time on the street, they're going to know probably as much as what the data is going to feed them. Where I think the data where we really kind of broke through was that, these guys take on, I don't know what New York's timeline is, but we work 312s now in LA. So they're off more than they are working. And it's a rhythm thing. When you're working patrol, you're like getting a rhythm of what the street's doing, where the robberies are occurring, where the shootings are occurring, where the bad guys are slinging their dope. And so when you take 4 days off and you come back, you're kind of behind the power curve again. And so how fast can you get that data and get back up to speed on what's happening? That's where I think this technology, the data, these data centers, real-time crime centers kind of help fill that void and point the cop in a really quick manner to where they should be concentrating their efforts on. And I think what I also saw, our patrol force is really young in LA now. I think the average street cop is probably 2 years on. You don't see, when I came on in 87, I had training officers that had 20 years on pushing black and whites, 19, 22 years. That's a wealth of knowledge. So how do you mature these young 2-year police officers into knowing that division, knowing who the good people are, where the hot spots are, who should you really be stopping? That's, again, technology is going to help them. And that's kind of how we've tried to take that hurdle when we've done it in LA. Same thing when I was in Chicago, helping Chicago PD. Baltimore was the same, Miami. All of that is, we got to make, it's a what is it, what's in it for me? That's what the cops really want to know. If I'm going to really buy into this technology, what's in it for me? And I think, without taking up too much more time, I think some of the departments, the mistake they make is a lot of these technology issues are grant funded. And so we bring it out, we roll it out to these young officers, and then 2 years later, when the grant expires, the thing just dies. And the young officers are like, "Well, what the hell was that all about?" Right? "I just spent 2 years trying to learn this thing, and now it's not working anymore." Or nobody's manning the command centers anymore, and these cameras, nobody's watching them. So, that's a struggle for departments to maintain technology, to maintain these real-time crime centers, and to stay proficient in the art of using all of that stuff. I don't know how it was in New York PD, Joe, but that was the situation in LA.
Yeah, I mean, pretty similar. I mean, listen, I mean, to see all these young cops now, and like I said, I had the same thing. I got on in 1992 in the police department, and we had 20-year, 30-year guys, riding radio cars still. Those days are long gone. I mean, I don't think you see any more even 40-year detectives anymore.
Yeah.
So the experience is gone, and you basically got rookies teaching rookies, and the first line supervisors, those sergeants, better be good. Because if they're not good, I mean, we know the lieutenant, I always just say, was the elevator operator, right? Didn't want to do it, he pushed it down to the sergeant. Didn't want to do it, pushed it up to the captain.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the lieutenant was the best rank in the police department. And the captains were just, they had a million other things going on. So it's those sergeants better be good. They better spend their time and money invested in them, because if they don't have good supervision, we could see things go really bad real quick.
Yeah.
So, getting those sergeants out there when you have such, especially a critical incident or, anything like that. Maybe it was something like we saw in Minneapolis. I've been screaming about that since it happened. Like, where's the supervision? Where's the sergeant or lieutenant? I mean,
Yeah.
you can't be riding the desk, man. You got to be out there in the street with your folks and prevent stuff like that from happening.
You both made a really important point, though, that I remember very well. I mean, sergeants, when I was a young patrol officer, had 25 or 30 years of experience. Almost all of them had been in the military, and someone had to have 16, 17 years before they'd even be promoted to sergeant. It was a pretty laborious prospect. But I remember coming out, because I was still in my junior year of college when I hired on, and I had a police chief who thought a college education was a waste of time, and that what we needed is just knuckle draggers that are in a patrol car that can go out and solve problems. Joe, you're now in this kind of really interesting position where you've gone from the streets and working and dealing, and you probably always, for most of your career, probably had a degree, but now we're seeing officers coming in with degrees. We're seeing officers continue on with education. And what kind of difference is that making? Because we're having a harder time finding cops, but it seems like we're getting pretty powerful candidates when they do come.
Right. But also the flip side of that too is that they kind of shoot themselves in the foot, because when you had this last couple of years of this anti-cop movement and the rhetoric that goes along with it, you had people with college degrees and different things say, you know what, I could go somewhere else and get a job and not have to deal with this aggravation. So and that's why we have places like Chicago and New York now talking about removing that college requirement, because once you have people with college degrees, you open up the doors for other things to happen. And I think that's part of the recruitment problem itself, right? If I'm going to college for 4 years to do all this stuff, I'm not going to go to a big major city and deal with what I perceive as a bad political take. So it's a dangerous game that they play. But listen, having a college degree doesn't make you a better cop, but there are some benefits to it. And that is, basically, you have the ability, first of all, communication, written communication. I mean, people don't realize it. And I'm sure Dennis and Mike, you both back me up on this. Half the time you spend filling out paperwork.
Yeah.
So if you can't write, then you have a problem.
Well, and think about your days when you were a sergeant and you were looking at police reports, and holy cow, yeah, some officers had a really tough time putting even a sentence together. Michelle Morris says, excuse me, aren't we soon to have recruits who only know how to function with data and technology? And she talks about not how to write a report with a pencil. And by the way, this is the daughter of a police officer, I might add. And the thing that I think is interesting about what she said is a few years ago, when we were looking at GIS and using GIS in crime analysis and in problem solving, especially in event management when something happened, we went through a period where we also said, but you still have to have a paper map that you can put on the hood of a police car and draw out and formulate. And I remember meeting a police chief of a mid-sized police department that said once a year he shuts down the computer for 2 days and makes everybody go back to write and hand reports. Chief, what do you think?
That's interesting. And Michelle's absolutely right. I mean, currently, I think some of our officers are now very good at data, very good at technology, but they're waiting for that machine to tell them where to go. I think Joe hit it on the head. College has a place, right? What college does is makes you a better critical thinker, because you're exposed to more diverse ideas and things in college that makes you look at the world a little bit different. But what makes a good cop isn't so much how educated you are. To me, it's life experiences. What did you do as you were growing up? What did you do as you went to college? I'm now a big proponent of, I don't think, this is, again, Dennis Cato's view now after 33 years. Let's make the entry level 25 years old. I want these guys to go out and work for a living for a little bit, so that when they do come on the profession, they now understand this is a great job. And this is what I have to do to keep this job. I got to continue to put in 8 hours of work. I got to be responsible. All of that. You take a kid that's 21 years old who was in college the whole time, didn't have a job. Maybe a lot of them did work themselves through school, but a lot of them don't. And so the first brush with a real job is becoming a police officer, and you gave them a badge and a gun and all this responsibility and the ability to take somebody's freedom away. That's a lot of responsibility you're handing a 21-year-old. You know, you go into domestic violence and you're trying to tell people how to live their lives, and you're 21 and never been married, or, you know, it's a hard ask. It is a very difficult ask.
Yeah, you know, and you also, Dennis, bring up a really interesting thing that people don't sometimes understand fully, and that is we take a police officer and we send them through a 4-month, 6-month, I don't know how long New York and LA's academies are, but then we turn them loose with a gun and the ability to take away freedom, something that not even the president of the United States can walk out and do on his own. And we do that with that minimal amount of training. In fact, I used to laugh in the state of Utah, and I suspect it's probably similar in many places. When I went through the police academy, it required fewer hours to become a police officer and carry a gun and take away freedom than it did for someone to go to barber school and learn the trade. Yeah. That's pretty frightening in and of itself. Joe, what do you think?
Yeah, no, listen, I mean, and there's many places that don't have an academy at all, right? Yeah. They have a regional training kind of thing, and they do that, and it's kind of like done in-house. Like, you know, they kind of like you walk in and like, okay, you're trained. Yeah. Congratulations. And it's just, you know, we teach you maybe 2 weeks of the law, send you to the range a couple of days, and that's it. So, yeah, the major cities do a better job because of the academies and the training that you have. But even in New York, right? So, you know, everyone knows New York City, but then you have the big counties outside. Westchester, Nassau, and Suffolk have their own academies. But basically after that, that's it. The rest of the state, all upstate, it's really just, you know, a regional kind of training. And then you have the New York State Police takes care of everything else. Yeah. So it's training, and we don't have, and maybe Dennis, you want to weigh in on this too, is there are certain things that we need national standards on. Yes. Use of force is one of them. You know, vehicle pursuits is one of them. I could sit here all day and then name a couple of things where there should be some national strategies and policies on how to handle some of these things, because you hear the same damn things every day, and you just kind of shake your head. You know, standing in front of a car, or you know, I see these cops where they jump on the car and the thing's moving away, and I'm just like, get the hell out of the way, right? I mean, yeah, it's the same things over and again.
Society looks at all police officers as being trained equally. And I don't think that's the case. I think Joe hit it on the head. You know, a large police department like New York, Chicago, or LA, yes, we have, and California has a post, you know, a police officer standard and training at the state level that makes sure every agency is maintaining certain levels of training. But not all states have that, and not all counties put their officers through the same rigor or courses. But then we get, you know, you get one bad shooting in the middle of the United States in some smaller agency, and then all of us are bad, right? All of New York and LA and all of us, we get colored in it, and it really is unfair to the officers to do that. And so I'm in agreement with Joe. You know, there's got to be some national standards. At one time, they were flirting with a national police force, right, for the whole United States, and trying to come up with that. That's a little bit tougher to do, but I think standards can be absolutely done.
For everything.
For everything.
Yeah. You know, it's really interesting too is when of course I had during my technology career, I had law enforcement agencies from all around the world coming to the United States, and they would call me up and say, hey, could you get me into LAPD or into New York City PD? They always wanted to go to the big PDs that they see on TV. And I was always at this conflict point, because I loved working with you guys. But no, what I wanted to go to was the mid-sized police department that actually was nimble enough to make change and implement things and have an impact. What are your thoughts there, Dennis?
I'm in agreement with you. Trying to change places like Chicago, New York, LA, that's like turning a battleship, right? I mean, it's a long way to turn that course. These smaller departments, I'd say something under 400, they're very nimble. You know, after LAPD, after my career there, I went to work for the city of Norwalk. It doesn't have its own police department, but it contracts with the county sheriff's department. But it does have a 60-person non-sworn public safety agency that handles all the lower level homeless, graffiti, parking, and takes that off of the sheriff's plate. But I finally learned how fast I could get policy changed and implement new training. I could get new equipment. I wanted cameras. I could get cameras. Do you know? I didn't have to wait for this monstrous beast of LAPD to go through its hierarchy of getting approval and then going to city council and getting money allocated. I didn't have to. And so when you talk about changing the face of law enforcement in this country, it's going to get done at that lower level because it's faster. It's so much more quick. That's been my experience.
No, I really appreciate that. I want to kind of shift gears a little bit because we've been really immersed the last 2 years in one of the biggest criminal cases that's been in the media and pushing around. It's the murder up in Rexburg, Idaho, of Tammy Daybell and then JJ Joshua Vallow and Tylee Ryan. The Daybell case, many of you out there know this. I've been doing a lot of court TV on this one and talking through a bunch of the behaviors there. Today started the jury selection. And I know you each have been involved in high-profile cases. These things have a tremendous toll on the officers that work them, as well as the court officers. But I listened to this young boy that was murdered, JJ Vallow, his grandfather, last night on the news, saying how he prays for the jurors because of what they are going to witness as they learn what these people did to these children and to Tammy. Yeah. Joe, I know you've been watching this and following it on True Crime with the Sarge. What are your thoughts right now as this thing moves in, and what do you think we're going to see differently in this one versus Lori Daybell and her conviction?
Well, the first thing, right, this is going to be a death penalty case. So now you got to get all the jurors that you're going to find. They got to get them death penalty qualified. That's going to be the first, major hurdle for them.
I am thrilled that a guy from New York even knows what the word death penalty case means. That is awesome.
Yeah. Well, listen, I mean, we won't get into the death penalty per se, but I don't wish death on anybody, like what was it, Samuel Clemens said. But there have been a few obituaries I read with great pleasure. There are certain things that need to be figured out in this case, right? So you're going to see the same, basically, quote unquote, cast of characters, right? The same investigators that came in, And remember, this one's going to be televised. The first one was not televised. And the biggest thing that I see in this case, Mike, that could be that curveball is bringing the wife as a defense witness.
Yeah, I think everybody's wondering if she's going to come in.
Well, you know what? If she comes in and says, "Listen, because Mike, this is right up your alley, right? Because this is like a cult, as far as I'm concerned." She could just come in there and say, "Listen, I did everything. It was all me. You didn't do anything."
And Alex, why not blame the dead guy?
Yeah, why not? Bring everybody back. And then, and this guy could walk on that. So it is a really strange case per se. Listen, he doesn't have many friends out there in the public. Let's put it that way. But the court of public opinion, as we guys know, is worse than any court you could ever go to. But when you have a jury and a judge that are going to be looking into all these things, it's not a slam dunk as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and as you're talking, I thought I'm going to pull up something that I created in the early stages of this case. And Chief, you might be interested in this. Is kind of this is, if you think back on your days when we were using GIS, this is a new tool called a story map, but it gives you the ability to kind of control messaging while delivering all of the content. And everybody, I'm going to put in the chat box a link to this if you want to go to it, or you can just go to profilingevil.com and click on the story maps and you'll get to it. But here we go through the case kind of from start to finish. So we start off with Chad and Alex Cox and everyone else, but then I kind of break them down individually and we go in and we look at the places that Lori Vallow Daybell was living throughout different points of this thing happening. And these maps are intended to be interactive so that you can go in and really start to drive into data if there's something that you're interested in. I talk about Chad and show some of the old video of him preaching his doomsday prophecy and other kinds of things. I talk about what was the motivator behind these murders, Chief, which was they believed that these people were possessed by zombies. And so they were actually doing a good job by getting rid of these little children. And of course, the wife of the guy, or of the man, he was getting rid of his wife so he could be with this woman. But anyway, it goes on and talks about a bunch of different things. And folks, you're welcome to go over there and check that out. But it's a great place to kind of get a little additional insight as you're looking into the case and kind of thinking about it. I was just thinking kind of out loud to myself today, Chief. I can't remember some of the cases we talked about in the past that you had dealt with or that the city had dealt with that really became a public issue, and how hard that is on a police department when you have the public so involved in an investigation.
Well, OJ's the perfect example, right? The OJ.
Oh, jeez.
I mean, that's the one that really kind of set all of us kind of a Twitter in law enforcement.
Were you a watch commander during that, or
during the OJ trial? I was working narcotics.
Were you?
I was part of an undercover street narcotics team at the time. I wasn't even a supervisor at that time. I was a detective 2 grade. But I think, you know, and Joe probably could attest to this too, being an investigator is very, very difficult. And as an investigator, you know, you go where the evidence takes you. You go where the testimony of your witnesses and takes you. But you also, in the back of your mind, have to start thinking, what is the defense also going to do? And how much time do I spend debunking some of those other issues that come up? And you may not catch them all. And as you prepare for a trial, it's monstrous. When you get to something like an OJ level, or probably this case, that murder book is probably like 2-3 books full of information. Yeah. And so to have one investigator kind of know all of that, it's kind of like a pipe dream. And will mistakes happen? That's the difficulty. And these juries and society expects us to be perfect all the time. And so, you know what I mean? And it, you know, take OJ. I mean, they had the blood sample in his pocket. He didn't do that purposely. You know, he was trying to be efficient with his time, and I'll book it when I get back to the station. But they could color that any way they wanted. And you have no really good defense for that. And maybe
it's really interesting.
Similar. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I go to crime scenes as a chief now, and what I do, I spend my time like stepping back. Like, I don't get myself immersed into the hey, let's pick up that evidence, I step back and try to take a look at it from some layman's point of view and say, what are we looking at here? What am I, you know, gone are the days where the officers are eating their hamburger on the trunk of a car at a murder scene, right? I mean, that happened in '87, right?
Smoking cigarettes. Yeah,
smoking cigarettes. We would get hammered if that happened now, you know? So
I remember the murder case involving BTK, Dennis Rader. I worked on that case quite a bit from a profiling perspective. And I remember talking to the investigator. His name was Kenny Landwehr. This guy actually carried that case his entire career. And just before he retired, they finally made the arrest on the suspect, which was just really
that's nice,
awesome. But there was one scene in the whole storybook of this thing where law enforcement found an ice tray in the murder scene out on the counter. And so they were trying to measure how long it would take for the ice to melt to that particular point, assuming that the offender or the victim had some ice and then the murder occurred. Well, it wasn't until a month later that one of the deputy chiefs who happened to drop by the murder scene admitted that he actually made some iced tea while he was there, and he's the one that pulled the ice trays out. So it's kind of a crazy thought.
Yeah, we even had trouble, and I don't know what New York does, but for probably toward the end of my career, it was really trying to protect the body from view, or trying to screen the body from view became huge. I know New York has those big barriers that go up at the end of the streets and stuff. We were using just like pop-up canopies. But what that does is you're introducing contaminants into a crime scene. You know, from an investigator's point of view and from a forensic point of view, who cleaned that from the last murder investigation, and who put the pop-up tent again on this one, and what did you bring into the crime scene? You know, anytime you're bringing something new into a crime scene, you could contaminate that crime scene. So, you know, as we move forward in protecting, you know, all of these, or changing how crime scenes work, we've got to be very cognizant about what we can and can't do, you know, and how much technology is out there. But the cost, you know, the community expects us to test everything for DNA, but DNA is not free. You know, do testing on cigarette butts. You know, if you have 1,000 cigarette butts at a crime scene, are you really going to test every single one of them? But that's what's going to come out at trial. Because you didn't test that one, they're going to say that one is the one, could be the suspect and not my client. Do you know what I mean? That's
exactly right. Hey, folks, I'm talking with Joe Giacalone from New York Police Department, retired, now at John Jay College, and with Chief Dennis Kato from the Los Angeles Police Department, now retired as well and working around the country, is supporting other law enforcement agencies. If you have any questions for them, please put them in the chat, and we'll make sure that we ask the question and see where we are on that particular thing. Joe, pick up where we were talking and share whatever thoughts you've got.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'm not a big fan. I never was about, you know, covering the body or doing anything. I mean, you start seeing sheets on bodies, right? Because you think of the OJ case, right? You bring the sheets in from the house and say, "Oh, look, we found a hair." Well, he used to live there, right? So, you know, there's lots of problems with that. But unfortunately, you know, society demands it, and you know, the police department is kind of, you know, have to then adjust to that without trying to explain. Well, by doing this, you can actually screw up the crime scene. Instead, they just say, all right, let's just do it to make everybody happy. I mean, if you remember, even in Ferguson, you know, they left him out in the street. Mike Ferguson, right? They left him out, and people were so upset that they left him out. You know, they didn't cover up the body. And I'm trying to explain to people that's actually the way to do it, right? Because you're introducing the evidence dynamics that you can't really then explain for after the fact. And, you know, in hindsight, it's probably a good thing that they didn't do that, because if we might have introduced some other issues that you're dealing with in there. So there's a lot of different things that the public doesn't understand. And I think nor do they want to understand sometimes. You know, there's just, that's just really the way it is. Like, people just, like, you know, bang their fist and say, this is the way it's going to be, and this is what you're going to do. And the police chiefs are like, okay, you know, what are you going to do? And then, you know, and then you get the chief coming to a guy like me, who was, you know, not only had a detective squad, but then I was the CEO of the Bronx Cold Case Squad, and you have them telling you stuff, and you're looking at them like, you know, like, are you kidding me? Right. You know, kind of thing. I mean, I always say that's going to be my last words are going to be like, are you effing kidding me? Right. And, right before I die, because that's basically what I've said my whole life.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, they would look at you and say, well, you know, like, yeah, like, no, you don't know. Right. So,
you know, it's interesting to watch the comments coming through, because I think the people that generally come on to Profiling Evil, and I think most of these podcast shows really understand the challenge law enforcement officers face. And I try to talk about that from time to time, about the emotional challenge they face. But New York just buried an officer a few days ago. I mean, Dennis, I know you've buried many, many officers. Yeah. This is serious business. And, you know, we have sometimes this feeling right now of feel good and be kind, and everybody having a camera is making police officers second guess when it is time to actually go in and do something. I wondered what your thoughts were on that.
You know, one, I applaud New York for how they handled that funeral. Just a little funny backstory. When I first became an officer, there were 2 Compton officers that were killed in an ambush in the city of Compton. And that was one of the first inline deaths, funeral that I had to go to as a young officer. But I distinctly remembered the politicians going up there and kind of grandstanding and taking over the funeral and kind of making it a point to, hey, look at me and what we're doing. And I came home from that funeral. I looked at my wife and I said, look, if I die in the line of duty, there are no politicians coming to my funeral. They are not sitting in the front of the pew. They are not going to do any speeches, right? And she used to think, oh, easy for you to say, you're going to be dead, and I'm going to have to deal with trying to keep them out of your funeral. But you know, it's tough when an officer dies in the line of duty, especially I would say in this current time where they feel unloved, they feel unsupported. The emotions that those guys are holding in is very, very difficult. You know, I give them credit for standing up and doing what they did at that funeral. You know, some people may say that's wrong, but it's a private moment. And I think everybody has to realize it's a private moment. Yes, the community wants to show support. Yes, they want to come up, but don't use it for your own messaging or you know, to get yourself on some type of video. That isn't the place and time for it. So, you know, that's just my say on the funeral part of it. You know, I was very touched by how New York handled that thing, though.
Joe, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, listen, I mean, New York politicians, specifically Albany, the governor, I can start naming names, but we're not going to get into that. You know, have not been very cop friendly over the last couple of years. Have pushed reform after reform, and I try to keep on asking people, show me in the dictionary or the thesaurus where the word reform is synonymous with good. Okay, it's not there. There are certain things that just have gotten haywire. Listen, the pendulum always swings one way or the other. It never, you know, there's never a happy medium. And you know, mark my words, within a few years, people are going to get fed up with what's happening, and the pendulum's going to swing back hard right the other way. And then any good reforms that you had, you're going to lose. And there is no, you know, New York is a one-party rule. I mean, that's basically it. There's no other, you know, it's just, you know, one party. And you can't govern that way, because when things go bad, there's nobody to blame. And this is where you just kind of like shake your head, and it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, because it's already happening. And people say, well, it's only anecdotes. And I say those anecdotes are real people. They're victims. I mean, we got women getting punched randomly now all over the city. We have a couple of actors now that got hit with rocks that got thrown. Did you hear about this? That happened, you know, yesterday, last night and tonight, where he got hit in the head with a rock. And now this only made the news because this guy's an actor, right? So this is where now things are starting to spiral out of control. And Dennis will attest to this, and I'm sure you will too, Mike. The perception of crime, or fighting that perception, is far worse than actual crime statistics themselves. Because you could turn around and say, listen, crime's down, which it technically is this year in New York City. But, you know, we still have a 30% spike we haven't accounted for over the last couple of years. But the issue that comes down to that perception right now is things aren't good. I mean, when you bring in a military invasion of basically Penn Station and Grand Central Station, and you know, this is the same governor that said subways it's not a problem, right? Next thing you know, there's 800 military officers and you know, everywhere. So this is when I talk about the gaslighting. You know, if you follow the stories and you look at some of these things, you kind of, same thing with the school resource officers and specifically out in California, right? Oakland, I think, was one of them where they don't want the SROs in school. And then 6 months later, you know, all the violence in schools, we're bringing back the SROs, right? And the media doesn't just say, stop. Are you the same people that threw the cops out? Now you want them back in? That never happens. And, you know, I bring it up on, you know, Twitter or the social media, but, you know, so I might reach a few hundred people, but the media themselves has to really, you know, get on top of this and say, you screwed up. This screwed up big time. And now you're going to have to pay the consequences for it. But that never seems to happen.
Yeah. Joe, I'd like you to take this question from Jenny. And then, Chief, what I want you to concentrate on for a moment here while Joe's answering is this is kind of throwing you under the bus, but I want you to maybe share what your one of your bigger regrets is, whether it's a case you couldn't solve or something you wish you'd have handled a little differently. It's something you'd feel comfortable in sharing. But Joe, yeah, I mean, the question, how demoralizing it is it when these officers are out busting their tails, making an arrest, and the offender's out of jail before the report's written?
Yeah, well, actually, I lived through that in the beginning, and this is what I'm talking about, the pendulum swinging. When I first became a cop in 1992, this is the way it was. It was a revolving door. Nobody went to jail. You were locking up the same person over and over again. there was even times where we would go down to central booking, and the guy would get released, and we drive them back to the precinct, in the back of the car. I mean, it was just that's what it was. It was a joke, and then things changed. Rudy Giuliani came in, and Bill Bratton came in, and then all of a sudden we did a 180, and everything started working out over the last 20 years. And then all of a sudden, the people who have grown up and I call them urban pioneers, right? You grow up all over the country, and all of a sudden you move to New York City, and you're a quote unquote New Yorker, and now you're dictating for people who live in places that you don't live near or have no idea about, and you're voting for things and affecting the lives of people who live in some of these precincts that are really bad and dangerous. And they're telling them, to defund the police, defund the police on the Upper West Side or the Lower East Side. Defend your own police. Not the person that lives in Brownsville or East New York or the South Bronx or something like that, because the thought process on some of these people were really crazy. And actually, I wrote a couple of op-eds on this, and for the New York Post, and trying to explain to people that you're making decisions for places that you have no idea how bad it is, and it's a blanket statement. And the people who live in the rich neighborhoods don't have to worry about the police, but now you've reduced the number. I mean, New York City's at, I think, 1993 or 1994 levels in policing. Like that's how far down there they are. And you got to be careful.
It is really difficult. And I think about one of our subscribers put here, Portland, Oregon went through it, and we all know what was going on in Portland. I mean, that place turned into a war zone because the pendulum swung so far to one side. And I guess that's the real challenge, is how you keep that, because the pendulum, in my opinion, should always swing a little bit as we continue to try to get better, but
still
not
stay in the center.
Yeah, that's right. Chief, I don't know. Do you feel like sharing a little bit of your heart and soul?
Yeah, I have no problem doing that. I wanted to talk about the pendulum, though, because Joe hit that on the head.
Yeah, please.
I came on in 87. So if you remember, in 92, we had that large riot, civil unrest in Los Angeles. It was right after the 67. It was our next one is 92 riots. And we went right after 92, almost where we are now, where people were MFing us on the corners. Nobody loved the police anymore, but it does swing back eventually, because something like 9/11 occurs where we're running into buildings, firemen are running in, so now they love you. Or something, unfortunately, it has to be something catastrophic that makes people realize, oh my God, we can't get rid of them all, because we do need them. I think Portland's an example of they're starting to backpedal on what Oakland is going through that. San Francisco PD, a good friend of mine, former chief of on LAPD, is the chief of police of San Francisco, and they kind of walked back a lot of their policies because crime just went rampant, and now they're losing all the businesses in the business district. So I think the pendulum will eventually come back. You got to keep these young officers engaged and keep their morale up while that happens. And some of them, it doesn't make it. We lost a lot of people in 93, 94 on LAPD. They fled to other departments because they felt like they were getting no support or no love. A lot of my good friends left for other departments. But let me go back to your original question. In 33 years, I have hundreds of regrets, Mike. If you're any kind of investigator, you're gonna, the one that really sticks out in my mind. I was a young homicide investigator. We have what's called an Asian crime investigative unit on LAPD. So I was part of that because I speak Japanese, but it's made up of a lot of Asian, there was Korean officers, Chinese, where we took over investigations where language or culture would play a part in trying to solve it or not solve it. So anyway, a murder happened in Koreatown where we find this lady shoved under her bed who had been strangled. Looked like a sexual assault. That one still haunts me because it's unsolved. It's a cold case, and Joe, you're doing cold cases. My hat's off to you. Those are some of the toughest cases. And that, you always want to second guess yourself. Like, what if I did this? Did I collect enough evidence? Did I do this? And so I keep calling every once in a while. I'll talk to my buddies and say, hey, what's going on with that case? Did anybody reopen it? Is anybody going to go back? And again, does technology catch up? Because we talked about cigarettes. I booked every piece of cigarette, thing in that apartment building. So hopefully we'll get to the point where we can DNA test some of that stuff. But That's one of my regrets. Another one is where, because of, again, as an investigator, learning by trial and error. Sometimes you might have great senior investigators tell you what to do, but not until you get on that stand and you get on the witness stand and you start going through your murder book, just putting it in order, and are you recanting it or recounting it? You know, one of my favorite phrases from a defense attorney is, are you lying now or were you lying then? You know, because you made a mistake on a report, you know, and you're trying to correct it on the stand. And are you lying now or are you lying then? And it's like, I'm not lying. It was an honest mistake. You know, I put the wrong word or something, but it doesn't work that way. And so I never got that guy convicted, you know, and he walked. You know, there's a lot of things I regret, a lot of times. I couldn't, there's too many of them. But the murder for sure sticks on my mind. Any murder is difficult. It's difficult for the family. They want closure, and you can't bring that to them. That hurts. That does hurt.
It's actually fun to watch some of these old retired cops that get pulled back into the cowboy units where they get to look at the cold cases and add, because it is kind of a feeling of redemption, isn't it? Because you did the best you could, but you fell short, and you never forget the image of that victim. Joe, how about you?
Yeah, everybody's got one, right? So mine is two stepbrothers, Taylor and Mason. They were murdered. They were thrown in a compacted room. And it wasn't a city-owned building, but it was 2000 Valentine Avenue up in the Bronx. And they were both stabbed to death multiple times. One body was put on one top of the other, and you know, it was like when the perp killed the first one, and then when he was bringing the second kid down there, he probably saw his brother at some point and saw what happened, right? So there was all that kind of stuff going on there. It was a case that we never solved. And like everything else, we know who the killer was. 99% of the time, I tell when I teach classes or when I go to some of these homicide associations, and 99% of the time, the suspect is in the case file somewhere. It's as simple as that. Like the Long Island serial killer with Rex Heuermann, the information was there already. You need that fresh set of eyes to look at it, but sometimes you just don't have the evidence to prove it. And that's where we were. We knew who did it. We knew who was responsible, but things got lost. It was an old case, and there were things that could have helped us. We just could never locate him. I mean, we had evidence places that had fires and floods and storm of locusts. I mean, you name it. I mean, just recently the NYPD had a big fire out in in one of their storage facilities that lost all kinds of DNA and all kinds of stuff too. So there's going to be hundreds of more cases that'll leave investigators frustrated. It's just you have to work with what you can, and not every case, unfortunately, you can solve, and you just need to come to grips with that. And it's just something that it kind of takes you along the way, though.
Yeah, Dennis, how can normal people? This is from Jenny Price. How can normal people who support the police, like she does, do the most for them? She says, "I vote a bunch of times when I lived in Chicago." But what can we do to let them know that we're behind them?
You know, that's a great question. And I get that a lot, right? I get that in the community. Here's what I tell people. And Joe kind of started mentioning that. In our careers, we see things that normal people shouldn't see. Probably only a soldier probably sees what we see more than we do. But what I tell the community members is this. An officer, when you go to a graduation ceremony, they're all bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and you ask every one of them why they became police officers. I want to help the community. I'm here in the long run. I want to help someone. I saw injustice or whatever it is. But then you go 5 years down the line and go talk to an officer, and you get a callous kind of look on society. And so what happens over the course of their career, because of what Joe mentioned, we see homicide scenes. We see things you don't want to see. You start compartmentalizing it, and you start hardening your heart, right? And I think the worst thing an officer could do is only hang out with other officers. One, yes, they're the only ones that understand what we go through, but they don't bring you back to earth. I tell young officers, hey, have a close set of friends outside the police department, whatever it may be. My good fallback is I have a bunch of dads from my son's basketball team, we still go out and have dinner and drinking. We'll go fishing because they treat me as Quinn's dad. I'm not Chief Kato from LAPD. You know, they make fun of me. They throw me in the lake. They, you know, but it humanizes me. So to answer Jenny's question, what I tell normal citizens, when you see an officer at a Starbucks, most people are afraid to talk to them. You know, if you ever watch they're waiting for their coffee, the officer's standing by himself. Go up and talk to him. Make them human again. Go thank them. You don't even have to thank them. Just have a normal conversation and treat them as if he was a normal person. You know, it will take them a while to get used to that. Some officers are very, you know, they're like, oh, what's this person want from me? Why are they coming up and talking to me, right? But you got to keep chipping away at that. You just got to keep chipping away at that. I will distinctly remember one of the big things we did in South Central LA is we have what's called gang interventionists, right? So former gang members. So what happens in Los Angeles is a lot of the gang members get older. They have their own kids. They don't want their kids to be gangsters. So what do they become? They become interventionists. Hey, Chief Kato, how can I help you? You know, they'll come out to the crime scenes and kind of hold crowds back and stuff. Cops hated them. Chief, why are you talking to those guys? And I said, because they're a tool in my toolbox. If I could keep you from having a fight at that tape, then I'm going to use them because that just keeps you out of trouble. But anyway, so this one intervention group was doing a Christmas giveaway. So they got all these bicycles donated. And I thought, you know what? Let's have some cops help them give these toys away. And I thought, what cop wouldn't want to do that? Well, a lot of them didn't want to stand next to a former gang member to give out toys. So they were very, very hesitant. So it became almost, I'm ordering you to do it. But at the end of the day, you could kind of see them kind of break, right? The officers, because you're looking at little kids. They're all happy. It's Christmas. They're getting a free, you know, bicycle. You're walking them through the little snow festival. By the end of the day, they all loved it. And I think to Jenny's, that's what you got to do. You just got to keep chipping away at them and make them remember that they're just normal human beings, that we're not asking them to be Superman all the time, right? And they don't have to bottle all their emotions inside of them because they will break. You know, I think that's why suicides are so high in police departments and stuff, because it is a tough profession. You know, the things Joe and I talked about, cases that you couldn't solve, those are in the back of your head. And they're not something you can just talk. I can't sit my wife down and talk to her about this stuff. Yeah. You know, that ain't going to happen. So, you know, just humanize them, make them feel part of society again. That's what I think she can do. You know, the money and all of that is great, but the average street copper will not see that. You know, they will not see that she donated money. And the silent majority, I guarantee you, the majority of people want law enforcement, but they're silent. They're too afraid to come out on social media. They're too afraid to talk about what they want in a safer community. And so what we end up with is the loud minority gets to, you know, carries the weight of a lot of our politicians in the vote. That's my take.
You know, it's interesting. People are afraid to approach police officers, and you have to be wise about it too. I mean, you don't startle a cop because there is this kind of flinchy reflex that you have when you're a street cop. But just a few months ago, right before Christmas, I was driving on Christmas morning. I ran over to get some gas in the truck and get some things, and I saw two cops pulled up window to window, and I thought, you know, I'm going to just grab them some donuts and some Diet Cokes, and I parked far enough away that they could watch me walk up because, you know, it just kind of, you just don't jump up and pull up, and I just walked up and I handed it to them and I said, hey, thanks, and they were young guys. They had no idea who I was, and it, you know, it made me feel really good because I especially, you know, you love street cops, and especially in this day and age when they put up with the malarkey they have to put up with. I'm just really grateful because I don't know that I'd want to do it today with the testosterone I have today as an old man. But you guys have been amazing to spend some time with. Joe helps people that have never heard of the word choir practice understand what choir practice is to a New York City cop.
Well, yeah, it's about just a bunch of, you know, I guess, you know, old timers sitting around just talking about things, right? I mean, but you know, if you just look at it, right? So yeah, Mike and I, you and I had a show, but Dennis and I, we don't know, but we could just sit here, we could talk for hours.
Yeah.
And that's basically what it really comes down to. And, you know, I just want to throw one quick thing in there. about people. And listen, nobody really votes. I mean, when you look at the amount of people that vote, I mean, Mike, it's pathetic. Maybe presidential elections. They think, oh, I voted. Yeah, the presidential elections, but your local, because the messes that these cities are in right now is because of the fact that people don't vote, and the loudest ones and the panderers and all these other crazy politicians that are out there are getting elected to places that they should not be elected to and making decisions that they should not be making. So if people really want to control about what happens next without seeing that pendulum swinging too far to the right, go out and vote common sense wise. Don't go by with what somebody looks like, or they're handsome or pretty, whatever. Vote for people who actually have a platform, and stick with that.
Yeah, thanks, Chief. I was raised in the early days of Wamba, and you may have even known Joseph. I don't know, but what's choir practice to an LAPD officer?
I was indoctrinated to that right away. So back in '87, again, different time. I think what's missing for some of the officers nowadays is they don't engage in that anymore. To me, yes, there was alcohol involved, absolutely, right? But it was a time to commune. Take yourself back to '87 in LA. I'll take one station. 77th is in the heart of South Central LA. That's where Florence and Normandy, where the riots kicked off at. Back in '87, when we were averaging about 150 homicides in that 12 square miles, it's only 12 square miles, about 150 homicides. We're down to about 50 now, 50 a year. But 150. There were days where I'd be on 3 crime scenes in a row, like one after another. Drive-by shootings, the Crips and the Bloods, gang was at its all-time high. Narcotics was going rampant. So you're like driving with your hair on fire for 9 hours of the day. And you have to unwind before you go home. I can't take that bottled up aggression, anger, and just go home. I'll explode. So choir practice to me, yes, was a time to drink alcohol with my friends, but nobody else would understand what we just went through in that 9 hours. Nobody will be able to kind of, what do you call that? Bring me back down, and kind of de-stress me, other than laughing and joking with my fellow officers that went through the same 9 hours of hell that I just went through. And then it's like, okay, now I could go home, and now I could unwind. To this day, I will tell you, when my family goes to sleep at 11, I still grab a cigar, a little bit of scotch, and I go in the backyard to unwind. It takes me about an hour to just de-stress myself from the whole day. And I sit there and I think about what happened all day long and what could I have done better, what should I be doing, and what's tomorrow going to be. That's choir practice to me. That's what that did for me as a young officer. It's kind of got me through the nonsense and the craziness of police work.
That is awesome. Well, thank you both. And we have a special treat. I thought we were going to miss this opportunity because I think there's a little bit of a time difference between Phoenix and Utah at this time of year with daylight savings time. But I wanted to introduce you both to a man that I've become good friends with and that I think the world of. And I'm going to bring him on while I just say a couple of things about him. But I'd like you to meet Mr. David Robinson. And folks, David has decided to run for Congress. And the thing that's so amazing about this guy, so David, as we talk, I'll just kind of talk and point. But if Joe would raise his hand, New York City Police Department, shortly after 9/11, Joe, you need to raise your hand so he knows which one you are. There we go. Right after 9/11, David, like many people, felt a responsibility to join the military, served a career in the Army, has combat veteran experience, and came home, retired, and had this beautiful son named Daniel, who became a geologist. Daniel, a few years ago, took his first job in geology, was out in the desert west of Phoenix, and disappeared off the map. His vehicle was found, and David left his home in South Carolina, purchased or rented an apartment in Phoenix, and started a series of searches. And we were so grateful to be able to get to know him. And I was still at Esri at the time, Chief. So, and Chief Dennis Kato, raise your hand there from LAPD, David. But we were able to put together some maps and some other things to continue to help him in his search. He has searched tirelessly for 2 years has not found his son yet, has found remnants of clothing and other things. But I might mention he's found, 6 bodies out in the desert that are not his son. He has changed lives for families, yet his life is still left in limbo. But David, take just in the last couple minutes we have, take a few minutes, tell everyone why you decided to run for Congress, and share any message you have about Daniel.
Yeah, first, good to see you again, and thanks so much for having me on. Yeah, I had to do what's right. You know, just like you said, when we had hear the call to serve the country, you know, to fight for everything that we love. You know, we had to stand up for our country. Unfortunately, I had to do the same for my son. I treated it like a mission. Went out there to search for my son. But while doing that, of course, you know, being human, you hear about other missing person cases. I didn't know 600 to 700,000 people go missing every year in this country. I didn't know over 3,000 every day, and 2,000 of those are children. So you have to have you can't be human if you do not respond to a call when you are able to learn a lot about missing person cases. You learn about how you know, you can utilize resources in a better way to help law enforcement and help families bring their loved ones home. So I had to answer that call too. So here I am answering the call again. Sometimes God puts you in, even in bad situations, He puts you in a place where you can be utilized to help other families. So that helps me to help other families.
I don't know if you guys have any thoughts or questions for David. Again, our time is short, but this is a man that I have grown to love, and I think I'll be seeing you in Nashville in a few weeks, David. Yeah, so.
No, David, best of luck in all you do, and especially your run for Congress. But I'm sorry you have to go through what you're going through. You know, as a father of 2 boys, I couldn't even imagine. I couldn't even imagine what you're going through. So, you know, good luck. If there's something, you know, you have my contact through Mike. If there's anything I can do from the LAPD side of the house and still utilize some of my contacts here, you know, feel free to reach out and ping me anytime.
Yes, sir. I truly appreciate that. Yeah. Thank you so much.
And I'm sure I don't have to tell you this, but just we used to live by the motto, never give up, right? So that was basically,
yeah,
you know, the motto that you got to live by. You never give up. You keep on moving forward, and you know, hopefully that you will find what you're looking for and find your son and bring him back home. You know, it's a tough thing. I've been with families, hundreds of them. I kind of know what you're going through, right? I say that, I tell people it has never happened to me personally, so I don't know what personally you go through, but I do know what families go through. So you have all my support out there too.
I really appreciate you, sir. Thanks so much.
And David, after we finish, go back and just watch the comments that are flowing in from everybody, extending their love and appreciation and sorrow for you as you continue to look for Daniel. How many volunteer hours do you think you've been able to amass in the last couple of years in the search?
Well, you know, hours is a lot. I wouldn't be able to put it together right here, but I can tell you we did 49 weeks of desert searching out there, just the desert alone, covered 35,000 acres of land. Like you said, found closures for other families. Also saw the case for the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, a stolen vehicle, but also got thousands of flyers out across this country. You know, was able to have volunteers going to the website to help me get those flyers across the country to bring awareness about my son's case. You know, and also to join in on the podcast and things like that to share other loved ones' story. I really encourage everybody who's in the chats too as well. Just pick a family and share their stories, because it's very important. That is one of the biggest thing anybody can do, is share a story. You never know, you hit the right person at the right time and can solve that case.
Well, everybody, make sure you go to pleasehelpfinddaniel.com. It's a place where you can donate to David's efforts. These searches are expensive. And frankly, Sarge, Chief, one of the failures in a profession we all love is that the police department, I believe, could have stepped up a little more. And hopefully they will as time goes on in other cases, and that as David continues to do this, just to show you that map that was created and the work that he's done. I want to just pop this up here so you can see the massive amount of work. I'm going to pull out the grid here. but the search is much larger than this now. I know, David, because we kind of lost a resource that was helping there. Oh, it's not showing on the screen.
Right, the map, and yes, sir.
I'm gonna pop that up and pull the right one up just so people can see that. Let's see. Here we go. So yeah, the area is much larger than this now. I know, David, but again, it's pretty unbelievable the amount of effort you've put into bringing your son home. And you probably tire of me saying this, but you are, in my opinion, probably the greatest example I've seen of a father who never gives up. And the day will come when you just kind of have to trust that God is going to take care of things. But until you do, I hope that you continue to get the resources you need, and we'll continue to pound a drum for you whenever we can.
Yes, and also as I know it's with the political side of things, but yes, I really, really want to help families. We have resources out there that I'm really need to fight for. That's why I'm taking this grassroots to Congress to fight for missing person cases. I'm going to change that narrative. It's not missing person cases, it's missing American cases, because these are Americans that go missing. We have the indigenous population that goes missing that we don't hear about. There's a really high population of indigenous women and children that goes missing every year, but we don't talk about those crises. Just like the opioid crisis, the missing American crisis is there. I want to make sure I do everything I can in my power to fight for missing loved ones. You can help me out by going davidrobinsonforcongress.com for those who want to help out.
That's great. Well, Sarge, Chief, hopefully Congressman, thank you so much for all you do. And I hope you'll all come back to choir practice, and to everybody out there that's supporting us, thank you so much. We'll see you soon at the next crime scene.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, you. Take care. Nice meeting everybody.
Yeah,
nice
good
meeting everybody.
Thank you, sir.